Good afternoon to all linguists and language educators in the Southeast Asian Linguistic Society Conference 2021. I am Chirbet Ayunon from Cagayan State University, and I am presenting our work, which I co-authored with my advisor, Dr. Shirley and Dita from De La Salle University. The title is Basic Clauses in Itawit. I'd like to give you a background of the Itawit as a language and its people. Itawit is one of the many ethno-linguistic groups in Cagayan, together with Agta, Kalinga, Gaddang, Yogad, Bukalot, Ilocano, Ifugao, and Ibanag. And the word Itawit comes from the root word, the prefix "i", and the word Tawid, which means the people across the river. And they're actually a group of people concentrated in the municipalities of Tuguegarao, Enrile, Peñablanca, Amulong, Igig, and of course, Tuao. Itawit belongs to the Cordilleran subgroup of Malayo-Polynesian branch of the Austronesian language family. And if you try to examine the subgroup of Philippine languages presented to us by Reid in 1974, which was revised in 2006, you will see that it is labeled as Cordilleran. So Itawit is classified as a member of the Cagayan Valley subgroup of the Northern Cordilleran group of Northern Luzon, together with the languages Ibanag, Gaddang, Yogad, Isnag, Malaweg, Itawit, Ilocano, and of course the languages of the various Negrito groups of Cagayan, Isabela, and Aurora provinces, which are labeled previously as Agta, Atta, and Dumagat. Now, in terms of status of endangerment or development, Ethnologue labels Itawit as a developing language, following Lewis and Simon's Egypts in 2010. So as a developing language, it's a language that is in vigorous use, with literature in a standardized form being used by some, although it is not yet widespread or sustainable. There were very few linguistic studies that have been carried out. From this, the earliest work on Itawit that has been probably conducted was that a work of Alathot in 1937, and it was followed by an unpublished data consisting of 372 lexical items collected by the SIL International in the Philippines in 1976. And we also have the Itawit Filipino Dictionary written by Dita in 2013. There were a few authors who have delved on comparing some linguistic features of Itawit with other languages. We have the work of Bolas and Hernandez in 2013, comparing the phonology of 3 languages, that of Bolas and Suknet, comparing the pluralizing morphemes of 4 languages, comparing the anaphors in 3 languages, and also we have that of Eli and Isidro in 2013, which looked into the morphological processes of Ibanag and Itawit. It was in 2016 when the Department of Education Division 2, when they drafted and released the Itawit orthography in close coordination with the Komisyon ng Wikang Filipino. Now, considering these works that I have mentioned, it's very clear that very few linguistic features of Itawit have been studied, which leads us to the observation that Itawit is one of the less relatively studied languages, among the Philippine languages. Okay, so our paper attempts to present a description of the basic clauses in Itawit. And that being said, the main aim of this paper is to present an analytic description of the clauses in Itawit as seen on the gathered spoken data and as attested by the chosen language informants. So our paper is generally a qualitative study that describes the clauses in Itawit. And the analysis is based generally on spoken data, which include naturally occurring conversations, display narrative data, and spoken life data. So I have 10 recorded natural conversations with 12 male speakers and 18 female speakers, which were recorded from November 2019 to March of 2020. And then the spoken life data came from 2 active Facebook pages that primarily encourage speakers of Itawit to use the language in the community. And to add up to these natural conversations and spoken life data, I also gathered narrative data from Itawit speakers using the pair film. So the informants for pair stories where Itawit teachers and students from an Itawit speaking barangay. So they were just requested to watch the 6-minute film, and they were asked to narrate the story using the language. So they were just reminded just to describe what they viewed, and that there are no right or wrong answers in the task. So all the responses were recorded and eventually transcribed for linguistic analysis. So if you look at my the Itawit corpus, it's broken down into natural conversations, narrative data, and spoken like data. But if you notice, I also gathered written data, which includes an excerpt from the Itawit Bible, poems, and riddles. But let me emphasize that the written data was only used for cross-referencing, as the objective of this paper is to reflect the features of contemporary or present-day Itawit. So overall, the Itawit corpus has 74,230 words. I am very much thankful to my informants, who are 6 native Itawit speakers from Peña Blanca, Enrile, and Tuao, and Amulung. They're all Itawit speakers from these towns, and they assisted me especially in understanding the linguistic data they gathered. These are the people whom I have constantly bothered as I started describing the language, the clauses of the language. The raw linguistic data were gathered through audio recordings, were transcribed, and were the primary data used in describing the clauses in Itawit. So for the morphosyntactic analysis of Itawit, the spoken data, which include everything now, the narrative, natural conversation, and spoken like data, were all subjected to transcription, classification, and division into clauses. And in examining the clauses in Itawit, I have provided glosses, and all examples are interlinearized in a 4-line format to elucidate morphological structure of the data. So the system of glossing is summarized as follows. The data on line 1, the morphological parsing on line 2, the glossing by morpheme on line 3, and of course you have the free translation. It is generally argued that Philippine languages are basically a VSO language. So by VSO language, it means that sentences produced in Philippine languages follow the structure which begins with the predicate. Hence, clauses are constructed with verbs occurring in the initial position, with pronominals, modifiers, and objects are positioned after the verb. However, subjects may also take the initial position, and verbs may be relegated to the reem position. And when this happens, a topic linker is often employed. Now, there are 2 general types of clauses in Itawit, the non-verbal and the verbal clauses. So non-verbal, in Itawit, non-verbal clauses are headed by a constituent which does not belong to the category of verbs, while verbal clauses are usually headed by verbs that occupy the initial position in the clause. There are 5 types of non-verbal clauses. I am referring to the nominal predicate, adjectival predicate, existential predicate, the prepositional predicate, and the locative predicate. So the first one is the nominal predicate clause, with the predicate nominal taking the initial position. It can either be a full NP or a pronominal. And there are 4 types of nominal predicate clauses which are discussed here. So we have the classificational, identificational, quantificational, and possessive nominal clause. The classificational, the predicate noun is typically a bare noun without a specifying determiner. So for example, you have seaman igina. So the bare noun here is seaman, which classifies the person referred to. So he or she is a seaman. Or you say, empleyado na kang munisipyo. So empleyado is a bare noun which classifies the person or the entity involved in the clause. Okay? Or identificational. The identificational predicates are either a definite common noun or a personal noun or a personal or demonstrative pronoun. So you'd say, Luisa yung magatagdag, or Luisa is the one standing, or you say, Dr. Sanyatan niya ko, or you say, Dr. Sanyatan is my friend. Quantificational nominal clause begins, of course, with some sort of a quantifier, usually a numeral, which, of course, if it's a numeral, it quantifies the entity expressed by the nominative complement. For example, 5 kilo ang karne yung ginatang na kang palengke, or talo kansyon kiningwa. Okay? For possessive, they actually contain a possessive pronoun or a genitive or a locatively marked phrase interpreted as a possessor in the predicate position. So, kwa imandiyaw ng asasana. So, the possessive word here is kwa or kwak. Kwak yaw nga libro. We also have the adjectival clauses, which are obviously headed by adjectives. So we have two under here, the qualificational adjectival clause and the comparative adjectival clause. The qualificational adjectival clause basically provides a description to the nominal subject. So you have guapa here, describing the nominal babae. Okay? Or under comparative, which describes to two or more entities, this makes use of the comparative particle mas. So mas na rin, no? You are comparing the cleanliness of one house to another house in this example. We also have existential predicate clauses, which may express the existence of something or may express possession of something. For example, you say, hinyan furaw nga bahoy chalawan. So there's a white pig outside. Or prepositional predicate clauses, which obviously have prepositions as head of the clausal predicate. So para kan ikayuyaw nga kansyon. This song is for you. Locative clauses may express locations or directions. This one this is introduced rather by the locative particle kang, or some deictic pronouns. So, kang linaw nak magtrabaho. So, notice the locative particle introducing the place. So, kang linaw nak magtrabaho. I work at Linaw. Linaw is a specific barangay in Tuguegarao. Transitivity in Philippine languages is determined by the type of complement given to the verb. So this has been stressed by Reid and Liao, and they said that it is the type of complement that a verb takes that determines its transitivity and not the number, So this is very different in English transitivity. On the other hand, valency refers to the number of core arguments that a clause has. So when a clause has one core argument, it's called monadic or monovalent. When it takes 2 core arguments, it's dyadic or bivalent. When it has 3 core arguments, it's referred to as triadic or trivalent. It's getting that from Dixon and Eichenwald 2000. The 2 types of verbal constructions presented here, the intransitive construction and the transitive construction. So for intransitive construction, which is defined by Reid and Liao again as having a verb with only single nominal complement, which is the core argument. The core argument is the argument that is needed to complete the meaning of the sentence. Now under here, we have ambient clauses, monovalent intransitive and bivalent intransitive. Ambient clauses do not exhibit core arguments. These are semantically intransitive constructions as they refer to temporal state. So they may not anymore require an accompanying noun. So for example, you say, nakilakit, there was lightning. Nalunig, the earth mover, there was an earthquake. Under monovalent intransitive construction, it contains only one core argument, which may be the actor or the experiencer in the clause. Nominals and pronominals here are used as core arguments. So, nagdalak yu abing. So, yu abing here, the nominal abing is the core argument of the act naggalak. Or nakarela the third person pronominal pronoun here is the core argument of the action nakarela. Okay? Bivalent or dyadic intransitive has 2 nominal complements. 2 nominal complements, actor or experiencer, and the theme or the patient. So it can have an absolutive pronoun or an absolutive full NP. So for example, nabambalnak kang kurtina, that is the theme. And katuna kayan is only a peripheral argument which is labeled as oblique. in this clause. So, giminatang ina ng kanlima nga bahoy. Giminatang ina ng kanlima nga bahoy. So, mother bought 5 pigs. Transitive constructions, unlike intransitive, requires 2 core arguments, the agent and the patient. So here, the agent is labeled as ergative, and the patient, which are always human complements, is labeled as absolutive. So constructed as such, they can be bivalent or they can be trivalent. Bivalent transitive has 2 core arguments, which could be full noun phrases or plainly pronominals. So you can have 2 full NPs or you can have 2 pronominals. We say, inupunan imestru. The agent here is labeled as ergative. The agent of the action is imestru, the teacher. And then the patient, which is labeled as absolutive, is yobing. Okay? Or you can make use of 2 pronominals, nesusukda. The agent of the act is a 3rd person plural da, which is labeled as ergative, and the human complement here, which is patient, is a 3rd person singular, 3rd person pronominal igina. You can also have with a pronominal ergative and a full noun absolutive complement. So you have your agent is a 3rd person singular pronoun, so inlangan na, which is marked as ergative, and your theme is ya anak na. Okay? Or you can have full noun ergative and pronominal absolutive complement. So you have mesusukne bagitolay, that's a full noun ergative, and then the pronominal absolutive complement is the 3rd person singular. Igina. The second one is trivalent or triadic transitive, which has, of course, 3 core arguments: the agent and the benefactive, which are humans, and the theme, which is non-human. So here, the agent is case marked always as ergative, because you always case mark the agent of a transitive clause as ergative, and then the theme as absolutive, and the benefactor as oblique. Okay? So again, you can have 3 full NPs. May pangwa Uncle Jimmy. So the ergative, the agent here who built the langkapi, the bed, is labeled as ergative. And then the theme, the one involved in the act, is the bed, which is labeled as absolutive. And the benefactive, which is the anak, ne anak na, the child, is labeled as oblique. It's the same thing with 2 full pronominals and a full NP. So yung bumatang ka, that's your agent, labeled as ergative. And then the theme is kan espejo, the mirror, labeled as absolutive. And the benefactive is paraigina, which is a 3rd person pronominal igina. Okay? So in summary, I would say that non-verbal clauses in Itawit are headed by a constituent which does not belong to the category of verbs, while verbal clauses, on the other hand, are usually headed by verbs that occupy the initial position in the clause. The paper has clearly distinguished intransitive from transitive construction, and analysis gives an affirmation to Reid and Liao's argument that Philippine languages, including Itawit now, follow the clause structure, which is typically right branching. So that ends our presentation. Mabalat kayong min for listening.